Hello, I'm Brandon LaBeouf with NOLATAC Training at the St. Bernard Indoor Shooting Center. In this segment of our Louisiana Concealed Handgun Permit Instructor Development Series, I want to talk about parades. Here in Louisiana, of course, we have Mardi Gras. Along with Mardi Gras, you have St. Patrick's Day, all kind of other parades and parade-type functions that we have to deal with. One of the places that fall under the prohibited locations for concealed handgun permit holders are parades. Now, this is a very kind of gray area. As we know, lots of laws are written somewhat vaguely or are written in a way that is not as clear-cut as we'd like them. This is an example of that. So, the way the statute reads verbatim is that you're not allowed to carry in a parade or demonstration for which a permit is issued by a government entity, a government authority. So, what does in a parade mean? Well, first off, let's define parade. In the context of this segment, what we're talking about are Mardi Gras, carnival-type parades with floats that tend to happen on a public street. They're going to be permitted, obviously, because they're going to interfere with traffic and things like that. The more important thing we have to define is in. Now, that kind of seems like an insignificant word, but it's pretty important. When you say in a parade, what does that mean? Does that mean you're in the parade, in the float, in the marching band, doing something within the boundaries of the street as a performer? What if you're watching the parade? A lot of people would say, no, I'm at the parade. Okay? But could the argument be made that if you're watching the parade as a spectator, that you are in the parade? You are participating in the parade event in the role of spectator. There's performers and there's spectators. You are a part of that event. Now, what we really need to get across to instructors is that you don't have the answer to that question. I don't have the answer to that question. State police doesn't have the answer to that question. Your brother-in-law, the attorney, doesn't have the answer to that question. It's one of those elements of law that has yet to be tested, meaning no one has actually fallen into that situation, it going through the court system, and we've seen how that particular set of circumstances played out. And even though we know that not all circumstances are going to mirror that exact one, it at least would give us something to go on, what we would typically refer to as case law. Now, the issue is that when you look at people who are typically arrested on parade routes, at parade routes, in parades, that have a firearm, number one, they typically have the firearm illegally. If not, I'm not aware of any concealed handgun permit holder being arrested just for having a firearm legally concealed via their permit on a parade route. I'm just not aware of it. Logic would dictate that if the firearm is concealed, how does anyone know you have it? There is some other initial reason that law enforcement is interacting with you. That typically is the primary reason that you're being arrested or investigated or dealing with the police. And then through the course of that encounter, the fact that you have a firearm, even though with a concealed handgun permit, is a secondary consideration that they then take into account and may choose to charge you with. Now, as instructors, it's important that you relay to your students that the general consensus, the predominant opinion among instructors, law enforcement, Louisiana State Police Concealed Handgun Permit Section across multiple administrations is that, generally speaking, if you are outside the barricades, if you are what we would typically consider a spectator, you are probably technically legal. And that if you are marching in a parade, a chaperone on a float, then you're probably technically illegal, the way the statute is. Now, the next layer of that is, let's say you're minding your own business, someone bumps into you, feels your gun, tells a cop you're doing nothing else wrong, and a cop comes up to you and says, excuse me, do you have a firearm? You say, yes, but I have a permit, and he arrests you for having a firearm in a parade. The next element of that is, of course, does that arrest, does that situation violate the Louisiana State Constitution? Because we know we've had some reinforcements of the Louisiana State Constitution, specifically the Second Amendment, as it relates to what the courts are required to prove in order to do things that in any way, shape, or form affect the Second Amendment. And it's an element called strict scrutiny. Of course, you have reasonable suspicion, you have probable cause. Way further down the line is strict scrutiny. All right, it has to really be looked at strictly. Most people in the legal community believe that if that were the case, If an otherwise law-abiding concealed handgun permit holder were arrested for simply having a firearm concealed on their person, spectating at a parade, that would not stand strict scrutiny. The problem is somebody has to fall on the sword and be arrested for that, and I'm not raising my hand and volunteering for that. So it's important that we give our students that whole picture. If you just say, hey, yeah, you can't carry at parades, well, you're making that decision for them, and that's not really your place, okay? There's an element of law that comes where we have to make our own decision of, is the law, the statute that we're going to choose to abide by, is that something that's constitutional or not? And if we choose to disobey that statute because we feel it violates the Constitution, that's an individual decision. And I'm not recommending you do that. I'm also not recommending you don't. That's something you have to decide. But what we want to make sure is that we're not making choices for our students. That is not our role. Our role is to give as much information as possible. And if you'd like to layer in your opinion of what you would do or what you think you would do, then by all means feel free to do that. But make sure they understand the difference between instructor's opinion and factual law. If you stand up there and say it is illegal to carry a concealed handgun, even with a permit, when you're watching a parade, that is a false statement. You don't know that. No one knows that. Okay? Just like you can't say, oh, it's legal, you're fine. As long as you're on the other side of the barricade, you're good to go. That's not 100% correct. You're more likely to be good to go than you are not, but you need to make that very clear to your students. So this is kind of one of those real consistent sticking points. I know the Louisiana Shooting Association, as well as a group of instructors, peer instructors, as well as the NRA lobbyists in Baton Rouge, are working first and foremost for constitutional carry. If we can't get that, then we're working to get some of those restrictions removed. And if we can't get that, then what we're working for is to get some of those restrictions better defined so that it is very clear. Just like recently we had some changes to the law in regards to restaurants. I thought that was pretty clear. You could carry at restaurants, you cannot carry at bars. We had another piece of legislation that explained it from the other side of the argument. So it made it abundantly clear that if you had a concealed handgun permit, you were perfectly okay to carry in a restaurant, but you could not carry in a bar. So that's kind of where we are currently with parades. Just please make sure you're giving your students as much information as you can and letting them make their own decisions. Make sure you're continually involved with your peers. And if you are an instructor, we definitely, if you're not already, recommend that you seek out the Facebook group, Louisiana CHP Instructors. It's a group of instructors, over 200 instructors now, that share information like this and kind of work on it. We also help and share business information and different things that you can use to make yourself a better instructor for your students. So as always, be vigilant. Be prepared. Y'all be safe.